right, we're back on SportsBit. Betting Insight today, Paulie and Teddy. Tuesday, September 20th. Big game breakdown, Clemson and Georgia Tech. And the Red Sox and the Orioles. Deep dive, 5 great minutes with Jimmy Vaccaro. How'd the books do? How'd the players make out? $100,000 bet that lost. We'll tell you who that better put his money on coming up. And the play of the day, Monday Night Football. The Bears, an astonishing 3-15 straight up at home in their last 18, Teddy. Jay Cutler, and a bad beat for us, play of the day. 9-7, a minute left in the third quarter. It goes over 42.5.
Yeah, and of course there were 43s available. Hopefully, if you took our play of the day yesterday, you were able to get a push with that contest. But, boy, with the game sitting at 9-7 with a minute left in the third, you're feeling pretty good about cashing that wager. But, you know, Cutler was hurt, and Cutler did what Cutler does, which is melt down on national TV. You know, good result for the house, at least a pretty good result for the house. The Bears certainly took a fair bit of money in that ball game, but with the game landing right on 43, that's a really tough beat if you had the under, as we did, and it's not a great result for the books, because that total was bouncing 42.5, 43. There were some 43.5s out there on game day. So that's usually not what you want if you're a sportsbook director, having to explain why all your losing wagers actually pushed and all the winners ended up getting cash. That's a very ugly meeting to have on a Tuesday morning with the bosses upstairs.
It's Jay Cutler. You got to tell the coaching staff when you're hurt. He had the brutal interception, and before that, there was a third down pass that he threw right into the ground when he got hurt on the fumble on his hand. Are we buying Wentz and Jimmy Schwartz?
I'm certainly not buying Wentz yet. And, of course, Wentz became the first quarterback in NFL history to go 2-0 in his first 2 games, and his team didn't commit a turnover as a rookie during that span. But make no mistake about it. You talked about the Bears being 3-15 straight up their last 18 at home. You know, and anyone that's giving Chicago 2.5 or 3 points for the home field needs to adjust those home field ratings a little bit. But personally, I mean, I love the fact that Philly was getting effusively praised by Gruden last night. It was all turnovers. You know, it was, here, Jay Cutler, we don't want the game. You guys take it. Here's a football. I don't want it. You guys take it. You know, it's no surprise Philly's 2-0. They just played their 2 weeks opponents of the season in the first 2 weeks. Things get a lot tougher for Philly schedule-wise down the stretch. They play 3 consecutive weeks with opponents coming off a bye in midseason, and that comes right before they play like at Green Bay and at Seattle. It's going to get tough for Philadelphia, basically, starting in week 3 when they travel to Pittsburgh.
We can explain San Francisco and Dallas. Wine and cheese crowd, corporate spectacle for the rich and connected. No atmosphere, right? How do you explain the Bears losing 8 of their last 9 at home and in only 3 wins in their last 18?
How do you explain it? It's real simple. Point the finger. Well, I mean, there's 2 things. One is the Bears aren't any good. So they're losing games everywhere, not just at home. But 2 is that you have a quarterback in Chicago, and he's been there for many years right now, who seems to play his worst in front of the home crowd. And that was the case in previous stop for Jay Cutler. He wasn't very good in Denver. And it certainly has been that case in Chicago. And some of it's certainly random. It's static. It's not anything particularly meaningful. When it comes to saying, why is it happening? The fact is, it is happening for Chicago. And it's been happening for Chicago. Nothing to do with the fans. It's everything to do with the fact that the Bears stink and their quarterback stinks. And that's been an ongoing problem for years.
You want someone fired? How about this Monday Night Football schedule so far?
Yeah, I got to rant here for just a minute. I mean, somebody should be getting fired for this. Because it's one thing to have crappy Monday Night Football games in December, when injuries and attrition have already taken place and there's some randomness in what the teams are going to look like. But here's the first 3 weeks of the NFL season. You got Niners-Rams last week. You got Bears-Eagles week 2. I know, did you look for next week? It's Saints-Falcons. That's week 3. That's your showcase game on Monday Night Football. Now, these games didn't show up here by accident. Some moronic TV executive picked those games. One guy said, yeah, let's go with this one. Oh, yeah, Bears, Eagles.
Yeah, big market.
That guy should pay the price for this job. Ask me, ask anyone in Vegas. We can give you a better idea of which teams are going to be good and which ones, well, not so much. Better than any TV executive can. So, yes, Paulie, somebody should be getting fired for putting Niners-Rams week 1, Bears-Eagles week 2, and Saints-Falcons week 3 in your showcase game. You got to be fired for that. There needs to be consequences. Don't know if there will be or not.
Yeah. All right. Sports Bit moment of silence for the Reds pitching staff. Ooh, ESPN Stats and Info tweet, the Reds have now allowed 241 home runs this season, tying the record by the 1996 Tigers. They got 12 games left.
Cincinnati, they play in a bandbox and the ball's been flying out of Great American Ballpark all year. The pitching staff suffered an enormous number of injuries. They've been starting rookies and running rookies out there. The bullpen got worn down, but that's a major league record, and there's still 12 more games to play. Historically bad Reds pitching staff. Yeah, that's worthy of a Sports Bit moment of silence.
How about one bad for the books? Money came in on the Marlins. They knocked off the Nationals at home.
Yeah, I mean, Miami goes from plus 115 to minus 125. I mean, these NL divisional races are about as exciting as watching paint dry or as exciting as watching grass grow, unless San Fran makes things interesting with the Dodgers, which I'm not convinced that they will. But the money was right last night with the Marlins, who played their way out of playoff contention in recent weeks, but certainly wasn't a game that Washington appeared to care about a whole lot.
Every Tuesday, market report. Let's before we do that, Charlie Whitehurst back in the league. The Brownies signed him. The Browns are going to start Cody Kessler, their fifth straight different starting quarterback, their last 5 games.
Yeah, I mean, what's the most exciting thing about Charlie Whitehurst? Well, I mean, he is dating Jewel, so he'll get the Browns some headlines. That says something. I mean, you'd date Jewel if you could, right, Paulie?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Exactly. So, but as an NFL quarterback, Charlie Whitehurst can only be a backup. He can only hold a clipboard when given the opportunity. He's had a handful in his career. When given the opportunity, every time he stunk up the joint. But, I mean, Cleveland needs some kind of a backup quarterback right now.
Yeah, let's start in the NFL. Money coming on the Texans up to -3 at Chris. Open pick. The Bills +6, now +4. Must-win mode at home against Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, Houston's taking money basically because the markets don't like the matchup of Jacoby Brissett, the Patriots' third-string quarterback, against that Texans defense that has looked pretty nasty over the first 2 weeks of the season. Houston, number 1 in the NFL at fewest first downs allowed through the first couple of weeks. As for Buffalo, and this is it's going to be confusing for people out there that aren't familiar with how the NFL markets work, how they really work. Okay, this is what the markets are going to do. They're not going to take Arizona over Buffalo. They're not going to take the good team over the bad team. The markets will almost always support the 0-2 team at home in a save their season type situation. Hence, the Buffalo money from +6 down to +4.
Early money for the Titans. They don't like this Raider defense. I don't blame them. First team since 1967 to allow over 500 yards in their first 2 games. And I understand this move. San Francisco, Seattle total bet down from 42 to 40.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee, bet from pick to -1.5. And you talked about they don't like the Raiders defense. An additional factor there, of course, the markets tend to bet against Oakland every time they travel east because the markets don't like West Coast teams traveling east for early start games. And the Raiders, of course, have a terrible history in that regard. The San Fran-Seattle total makes perfect sense. Obviously, open 42, now down to 40. The Seahawks offense stinks, but the defense ranks number 1 in points, number 1 in yards allowed so far this season. But how about this stat for you, Paulie? You'll enjoy this one. Blaine Gabbert, right now, through 2 games, has a higher quarterback rating, just as many touchdown passes, and fewer sacks, the same yards per pass attempt, and more passing yards overall. Blaine Gabbert we're talking about compared to Aaron Rodgers. So maybe the San Fran offense not quite as bad as people had it projected to be coming into the campaign.
Yeah, one more. How about the Jets? Bet from +4 to +3 against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs were missing both starting guards from their offensive line and really couldn't control the line of scrimmage at all against the Texans' powerful front last week. So, hard to imagine that's going to change significantly against the Jets' powerful front. It is worth watching that injury report closely for the status of KC's offensive line.
Friday night college football. TCU and SMU, money coming in on SMU. And Friday night on Fox Sports 1, they're betting Utah at home up to 3 against USC.
Yeah, they're betting USC on Friday night at home against Utah. And the question is, can the Trojans hang in the trenches versus the Utes? They certainly have better skill position talent, but the Utes are in revenge for a 42-24 loss last year when they were ranked in the top 5. And now I'm starting to think that you're right, Paulie, and I said this wrong. It is Utah.
No, it's Utah, yeah.
And Utah has taken the money at home.
Yeah.
And I just said that whole thing entirely wrong because I remember that game was in L.A. last year. But the bottom line is that the Utes taking the early money in this contest because the market's not convinced that the Trojans can hang in the trenches, even with that skill position talent edge. The money for SMU, I mean, SMU has only scored 3 touchdowns in 17 red zone trips so far. The markets say they've underachieved to their yardage totals. That's why we're seeing a little bit of SMU money. The other thing is that they're the number 1 defense in the nation so far in intercepting passes. They got 9 picks so far this season. The Mustangs defense significantly better than it's been in recent years.
Money coming in for Florida against Tennessee, even though Del Rio's out at quarterback, and I understand this move with West Virginia money. Life as an independent for BYU. What a horrible schedule to start the season.
Yeah, and the Cougs, of course, are coming off back-to-back losses. And tough losses, tough physical losses. Now they got long travel to go east to face an explosive offense. It's not a good spot for BYU. The markets recognize that immediately, betting West Virginia from -5 to -7. And the money's come on the Gators. I mean, that's given the series history. What's it been, 11 straight Florida wins, including that come-from-behind 1-point win last year. Hard to justify the Vols laying more than a TD. And that's not even counting how poorly that Tennessee has played in at least, 2.5 of the 3 games that they've been in so far this season. So, not surprised, Florida's taking money there. That being said, if Tennessee has a chance, we know what they'll do, Paulie. They got a lot of revenge to exact on those Gators if they have the opportunity.
Jimmy Vaccaro will run down the deep dive, 5 great minutes, how the books do, how the players make out. Up next, big game breakdown. Clemson and Georgia Tech and the Red Sox and the Orioles on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Do your research before you bet. Check out our ratings guide to see which books have the best ratings and sign-up bonuses. Open up several accounts and shop for lines at SBRodds.com. Always be ahead of the game.
All right, back on SportsBit. Time for a big game breakdown. As always, live on SportsBookReview.com. We'll do Clemson and Georgia Tech today. And then on Wednesday's show, the Texans and the Patriots in Utah and USC. Clemson, 10, 57 the total. Paul Johnson, the last 2 times as a dog against Dabo Swinney, has beat him outright. And don't forget about what happened last year. Florida State came to town and Georgia Tech shocked them, Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, Johnson's been a real good home dog over the years. As you mentioned, he beat Swinney each of the last 2 times, including 24-6 the last time here in 2014. That's the fewest points in the 9 years that Swinney's been on the job for Clemson. And you talked about the win over Florida State as a home dog here last year. Now, Clemson got the revenge for that loss last year. They beat them 43-24, a 7.5-point home favorites, and it really wasn't that close. They outgained Georgia Tech by more than 300 yards in that ballgame. If it were not for a handful of big plays for the Yellow Jackets, it would have been a lot worse than the 19-point loss that they suffered.
Not all option all the time here with Georgia Tech. Justin Thomas, 19-38 for 335 with a touchdown and no interceptions, but he's the leading rusher. They don't have a lot of explosive backs, Teddy.
No, I mean, I haven't really been overly impressed with Georgia Tech this season. I mean, the one game I saw him in was that early start game in Ireland. It wasn't pretty offensively for the Yellow Jackets in that contest because of that lack of explosiveness. That being said, their defense looks pretty good. But, it's hard for me to get to the window betting against Deshaun Watson. I mean, the guy's only a junior. But he played road games versus 4 bowl teams last year and won them all. Played the ACC championship away from home. Played the playoffs away from home. This is a quarterback with plenty of road savvy. And for most teams, especially on a short week, man, it's really tough to prep for Georgia Tech. But last week, even though they're playing on a Thursday night, last week Clemson played South Carolina State in a game that ended up being shortened because it was such a blowout, and they played 12-minute quarters in the second half or whatever it was. They were favored by 53.5 in that contest. So I have to think that they did a fair bit of prep for the Georgia Tech option last week in practice. So it's not one of these, hey, we got to turn around and figure this option out in the next 24 hours because we're playing on Thursday. I think the Yellow Jackets, the Tigers, paid a little bit more attention to it last week than you normally would against a BS level of
Well, maybe there's a hangover here like Ohio State last year that they realize they're so talented they can just flip the switch and put these teams away because they struggled with Auburn. They didn't move the ball in that game. They struggled to put Troy away at home. And then you had the game last week. But some buffoon gave them a first-place vote in one of the polls, which I can't believe.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't rank them over Louisville right now. But look, the polls are asinine. And anyone, if you even look at, if you spend 1 minute considering what the polls are thinking or who's ranked higher than who, it's a minute that you just waste, a minute of your life that you just wasted. All right. Because the polls, there's nothing to them. You know, it's a bunch of guys that didn't watch the games, that may or may not look at the final score. You know, the coaches poll gets handed down to literally the lowest level intern on the staff.
Very true.
And the writers polls, literally, they don't watch any of the games. They don't watch anything other than, whatever's on ESPN that day. Or they watch, maybe 2 or 3 games. I mean, on a college football Saturday, I'll watch 20 games, Paulie, on the reg. I'll know what happened all over the board. The guys who are voting, they don't know any of this stuff. So to see Clemson get votes or whatever, I could care less what the votes are. This much I know. The chemistry in the locker room for Ohio State wasn't good last year. They had 3 quarterbacks. The chemistry in the locker room for Clemson, to the best of my knowledge, is not an issue. They have 1 quarterback. Everyone seems to respect it.
Early lean?
I have no strong opinion on this game.
Yep. All right. Yep. Game number 2, liveoddsportsbookreview.com. Red Sox and the Orioles. Rodriguez against Gaussman. Orioles $1.29.5 the total. Porcello with a complete game gem yesterday. 4-game lead now as they continue this 4-game series. And Big Papi did it again, Teddy.
Yeah. Here's the MLB stat of the day. With his 35th home run, David Ortiz now has the most home runs ever in an age 40-plus season or older. And 1 more home run. He'll also set the all-time record for most home runs by a player in his final season, tied with my childhood hitting hero, Dave Kingman, who, as a kid,
yes,
he was my gan. Yeah. So now we got to talk about Porcello. Porcello's the Cy Young now. 21-4, an 89-pitch complete game. That was his lowest pitch count of the season last night.
He's got it locked up. How about Gaussman? Where did this come from? Last 5 starts, 4-0 with a 0.82 ERA. Gave up a 2-run homer to Victor Martinez in Detroit. Only other run in that span. And plus, he just shut down the Red Sox last start in Fenway.
Yeah, I mean, where'd it come from? I mean, Gaussman was a top-rated prospect. He showed nasty stuff even from his rookie year. But, some pitchers get it all together right off the bat. Other pitchers, especially in the AL East, where you're playing so many good hitters, takes a little bit longer. This guy's got ace-level stuff. Last week at Fenway, under the pressure, big-time pressure. I mean, he was a step ahead of the Red Sox all night. 8 shutout innings in that ballgame, but there is a big red flag following that performance. He threw a career-high 120 pitches in that game. Whenever a guy's coming off a career-high number of pitch count in September, ain't no way I'm backing him in his next start.
Yeah, how about Rodriguez splits here, Teddy? Disaster at home, better on the road.
Yeah, I mean, most left-handers dread pitching at Fenway. It's been a nightmare for Eduardo Rodriguez, but he's been just fine on the highway. Not great, but fine. Look at the 2016 numbers. 0-4 at Fenway with an ERA over 6. His road ERA a good 2 runs lower, and he's also notched a couple of wins as a starter on the highway. But, I question his confidence right now. It's a big question mark for me. He only lasted, he didn't even get out of the 3rd inning against the Yankees in his last start. And Boston rallied to get him a no decision, but it's not like he's going into this game pitching particularly well.
I got news for you. When they make the playoffs, my Game 3 starter is going to be Buchholz. If Wright doesn't come back, and this guy's been huh?
I'm with you. I got no problem with that. I mean, Buchholz, he's done it in the postseason before.
3
he's had
straight.
A lot of bad efforts, but
he's
also got that A game that I'm not sure Eduardo Rodriguez has right.
Yep, back-to-back quality starts out of Clay. Up next, Jimmy Vaccaro. How'd the players do? How'd the books do in a play of the day? Coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
All right, 5 great minutes with Jimmy Vaccaro on every Tuesday during the football season. Bookmaker for over 40 years at Jimmy Vaccaro on Twitter. And he's at the South Point here in Las Vegas. Jimmy, let's start with college football, and the Louisville freight train rolls on. Lamar Jackson now the favorite to win the Heisman. This is incredible what they did to the number 2 team in the country on Saturday.
Yeah, I actually saw the kid about 70-1 to win it about a month ago, and deservingly, he's right there now. And you can't push aside anything that he's done. Florida State defense obviously was a no-show, but I don't really care if it was the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. The way this kid plays, he just has so many moves. He understands the game. He throws the ball well, keeps everybody off balance. And yes, it was probably one of the bigger losses of the day too, where all the money showed on Louisville. As we opened that game, Florida State, a road favorite at 2.5-1. We closed Louisville 1.5, and that wasn't half the damage that Louisville did on us on that day.
Do you like this, that you got a team that was kind of just inside the top 25 in the preseason to become one of the best teams, and now 5-1 to win it all?
Yeah, I've said that, Paulie, in all sports. The Final Four, or not, in this case, the Final Four for football also. One very good team that's not accustomed to being in that situation draws a lot of attention because it's the new guy on the block trying to beat the old standards. And naturally, we have a long way to go, but I enjoy it because it does create more interest. Florida State, they'll be in the background for about another week or two, but if they keep winning, they'll be back in the spotlight also. But right now, in any sport that we have, anytime there's an elimination tournament, I like at least one team that, not that we didn't give this kid a chance way back when, or this team, but we didn't think that they would go and dismantle a Florida State team. And now, deservingly so, if they went out, under the rules of people like me and you, how the hell can you keep them out of the tournament? But we'll see what happens.
Yep. How did you do? How'd the players do Saturday?
We had a very, very good day. Now there were some few games that absolutely undressed us. The Florida State game was one of them. Naturally, the late game, the Ohio State-Oklahoma game, not even a sniff for Oklahoma players. So we got whacked out there real good. I'll tell you what a solid and Saturday game was, Paulie, was the Oak State Pitt game. We opened the game 6.5. We closed at 3. Could have went to 2.5. There was nothing on Oak State's side, and the late touchdown for them to win by 7 helped us quite a bit. And everything else was just like a back and forth. The Alabama-Mississippi State game, the Mississippi game, as crazy as it was, that turned out a very good game for us. Another decent loser for the winner for the players, but bad for us, was Texas A&M. Auburn scored first, but they were never really heard of again. We opened that game 4.5 and closed at 2.5 Auburn. But we chopped up so many parlays. We had such a good night, and a huge game for us was the Texas-California game. They're buying into Texas, and rightfully so. But to make them a 7.5-point favorite on a team that plays flag football, that was a very, very, very good result for a good day.
Yes, and a very good Sunday for you, especially with the Packers going down and the Seahawks lose outright. All the money lines, all the teasers out.
Yeah, you really, I can't say any more than you said. It was just about what you said overall. It wasn't like one game ran 3 or 4 points, but there's some key games. In the Packer game, naturally, was a big winner for us. But again, one of those games where you just didn't know how much you won until you put the final results in the computer, and that was all with the Seattle Seahawks. Even though the game was put up late in the week because of the status of the kid at quarterback, of Wilson. But from that particular point, it was just money line, teaser. I honestly don't know if we wrote 50 tickets on the Rams as opposed to maybe 500 or 600 had a piece of somehow the Seahawks in it. So the Seahawks game actually was the best game of the day for us.
This Las Vegas is an event town, and we usually see this with boxing, and South Point is a great spot, but it's not. You're not by on the strip and the hubbub there in Las Vegas on the boulevard. How about a $100,000 bet on the Miami Dolphins yesterday?
Well, we were talking about it earlier, my friend, and not to single out the South Point, but this is happening everywhere. I mean, every time that I get a chance to talk to one of the guys around the city, some more people just showing up. I guess we would call them event bettors. They're not everyday grinder, like obviously have so many in the city trying to earn a living, and some do fairly well at it in the long run. But this guy here, this is the second bet he's made this year. He came in, this was a Thursday, so we had a lot of time to say yes to the bet, and he took the He took the Dolphins plus the 6.5 for 110,000 to win 100,000. And I would suspect he'll come back maybe next week. But this is the way it's going, my friend. You know, talking to some of the guys around the city, they'll tell you there's just new people popping up, betting these six figures on these games. And I would suspect most of the places would take it, especially if it's an NFL game, and especially if you have a day or two to maneuver a little bit. But you're seeing more and more and more of it. And how about this? Obviously, he lost his bet, but in the first half, it looked like he had no chance. In the second half, with a Hail Mary at the end, he could have scooped us. So, but that's where it's going, and that's where the excitement is. That's what I think brings out people like this guy here, and that's what makes it such a strong September till January in the sports books.
Yeah, he was actually rooting for Gostowski to make the field goal from 39 yards to put it on 10, and then the Patriots would probably let him go down and score, but it didn't work out that way. How big of a loser is it for you if the Cubs win the World Series?
We bailed out. It's a small lose, but remember, it's like everything else when you deal with these futures. The Cubs were, you know, we robbed the public of their money for 30 straight years. They had no chance. And then obviously with Madden there, we knew that they were going to be better. So you weren't getting 150 to 1. You just started out at best. I think you were getting 10 or 12 to 1. So, you know, and that after they start winning with that big start that they had, it went down to like there's no hurt whatsoever. Our biggest concern is the Houston Astros, but everything else is okay. Again, we lose a matchstick if the Cubs win it, but it's no big deal at all. And I'm sure if you spoke to everybody around the city, similar situation. It's not like you were grabbing 30 or 40 to 1, you know, back in March on this team. It was much, much lower.
Yeah. Hey, a quick look ahead to Thursday. Hell of a game with the Texans in New England. They might call you to play quarterback. Belichick is terrific in this spot as an underdog, which that's what the line's at right now, home dog.
Well, I mean, obviously, you watch this kid, and he was a little mixed up in the second half, and I surely don't want to bet against Belichick at home, even though I might be the quarterback of that team. Texans, what we're telling you on a neutral field, and they would be a small favorite, but I don't know how Belichick does it. I mean, I just don't know how. You know, getting front, 21-0 real quick yesterday. The guy's a magician. He's the best, and we always talk about Lombardi. This guy's in the same case. I would suggest that don't go crazy and bet on the Texans. That's the only advice I'm giving you, my friend, right now.
Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you next week. Good job. Thanks, Jimmy.
Hey everyone, tune into the MLB Odds Couple Show today, Tuesday, September 20th. You know, Mike Brenner, I swept the board yesterday.
You did.
Yep, three winners, very, very nice.
Buddy.
And today's card, there's a lot of borderline plays. There's two I'm definitely going to give, and we'll discuss all the borderline plays. Mike Brenner battling through his illness.
Yes.
Catch the show today. You have anything to add?
I do. Come on over to our house. I'm getting back to getting disciplined. One play today, it's a casher.
Okay.
I always love that segment, Paulie. I really do. It's one of the best segments, maybe the best segment that we do every week. Thanks to Jimmy for showing up here on Sportsman. But it's play of the day time, Paulie. And let's go to the NFL this week. We did it last week with an early week report on early week line mover on Tuesday, and that was a mistake because we ended up getting the worst of the number with Baltimore against Cleveland when you could have cashed that on Sunday. That being said, conceptually remains the same. I'm going to take my shot here with game number 463, the Oakland Raiders plus 1.5. We talked about this game in our line moves report back in segment 1. Look, the Raiders can't be dogs to Tennessee. The Raiders are better than Tennessee. And I want Oakland off a loss, and I want to fade Tennessee off a W. Wrong team favorite. Raiders plus 1.5. That's
right.
our play of the day.
Excellent. Love Mr. Vaccaro. Nobody runs it down like Jimmy, and you might want to buy it up to 7 when you're putting $100,000 on a game. Could have used that extra half point in that one. Wednesday, Texans and the Patriots and USC and Utah. We'll see you tomorrow on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.